Hey, everybody. I'm elated to bring you this interview with John Templeton. He has shared the stage with Tony Robbins, Dr. Deepak Chopra, Dr. John Demartini, and many others. He talks about authenticity and why it matters. I was astounded at the depth and breadth of his knowledge, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. Keep a pad and paper handy. You're not going to want to miss this. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Next Level Healing. I'm your host, Dr. Tara Perry, and my guest today is an ex-Army Special Forces physical instructor, a Guinness Book of World Record holder and national champion, a successful strategic investor. He has trained professional athletes, Olympic athletes, celebrities, and shared the stage with Tony Robbins, Robin Sharma, Dr. Deepak Chopra, and Dr. John Demartini. Welcome to Next Level Healing, John Templeton.
Hello, thank you for having me, Dr. Perry. I was looking forward to it.
So you have shared the stage with some very heavy hitters. What is unique about what you are sharing about personal transformation that causes them to keep asking you back?
I went through a really big crisis in my life, and through that, I took a number of years away from life. I just sort of went into recluse mode and did a lot of deep contemplation to figure out who I was. And through that process, it's like I found my unique spark. And I've written a book about it, and it's all about authenticity and diving into who we are at our core, not who the world has told us to be, not who our parents, our teachers, our role models, none of that. It's really about getting to the core of who we are. So it was through that experience, call it a existential crisis, that I got to know John for the first time in my life, and I created a framework, a model to help myself stay in my center, stay in my power. And that's really what I share. That's what I share. It's about getting to I want to say getting beyond our emotional blueprint to our soul. I don't know if you use spiritual terms around here, but
I love it. No, that's so great. I love what you just said. Getting past that emotional blueprint that is so stuck in our amygdalas and the fear center and getting to who we authentically are. That's beautiful.
yeah. And I mean, to share the stage with those guys, that was happening during COVID. So it was online summits. And I think for anyone who has a mission and a unique perspective of things, then yeah, everybody's opinion and perspective is so relevant for each of us to grow. And so if you trust yourself enough to share that message, I feel that you're going to get the opportunities to speak and share.
I love your Instagram. In fact, I wrote down like literally everything you had on there for the last week. One of your quotes is, "Your inner genius holds the key to your mastery." What? How did you shed the old emotional blueprint and connect to your inner mastery at a time when you were struggling?
Yeah. Everybody I read, I mean, I went through philosophy, theology, and psychology, and everywhere I read it, it was essentially like pain is your pathway. Pain is the gateway. If you try and avoid pain all the time, you're going to live on the surface. And of course, it's kind of natural to live on the surface at the start. But after a while, I saw the patterns in my life playing out and when I actually need to go into this pain. I need to actually face what's beneath me. Like, what am I ashamed of? What am I scared of? All of those things. So I turned towards them. And I want to say it ruined me for a number of years, but it was very, very necessary. And so I sat with my pain. I sat with how worthless I felt. I sat with how ashamed I felt. Despite my success, Guinness World Record holder, all of these superficial, all they were points of validation. That's all they were. And when I looked back on my life, it was like, why did I do that? I didn't feel enough. I wanted to be validated. And I had been really successful because of that, but I was not happy. I was not fulfilled. So I went, okay, what's driving me? And it was just immense shame. And I sat and I cried. And this went on it was 3 years where it was really bad. I went into depression because the whole illusion of my reality came crumbling down and I was lost. I was confused. And so I sat in that pain for long enough that I finally got to the center. And I was working with a therapist at the time, and some were good, some were not so good. And one lady said to me, she said some things, and they didn't feel right. And I listened to her going, she hasn't been through what I'm going through. She might have read a book, but she hasn't been through this. And I went and I sat in my room and I thought to my, because I didn't know which personality was the real John. Was it this successful John? Was it this sad, depressed John? Like, who was the real John? And I sat and I meditated. And that meditation went for 4 hours. And I wasn't planning on that. I just wanted to, to get to know me. And I sat there and I meditated and I went to a point in which everything just went silent. Everything went completely blank. And that was the first time in my entire life that I had a reference point for who I was. Because up until then, my thoughts were running me, my emotions were running me. And after that meditation, my life completely changed because no matter what was happening around me, a big part of my struggles, like my financial wealth got ruined after COVID. And my identity was attached to that. So my identity had crumbled. But after that meditation, I was like, okay, I know who I am. It doesn't matter how much money I have. I'm me. It doesn't matter if people love me. I'm me. And that seed within me, I call it the soul, the authentic self, that had abundance, that had self-worth. So there was no questions anymore. From there, of course, life was crazy and I had to figure out what had been happening. This is when I dove into the research of like, well, who, what does it mean to be authentic? That's where I started my whole research. Um, but it was really through that process of just facing my emotional pain, looking at my belief system about what it means to be authentic, what it means to have a meaningful life, what it means to be in a loving relationship. What is the purpose of life? They were the two questions. Who am I? What is the purpose of life? And through that process of just, I want to say suffering, but it was intentional suffering. It wasn't just a victim mentality. It was very much, I'm going through this to shed the layers of my call it the ego. And yeah, turned into a book with a process that I wrote it for me. I wrote the book for me so that if I ever get stuck in life, I just refer to the book. It's like, if you're feeling this emotion, this is what's happening, do this. If you're feeling that emotion, and through practice, it's become quite an organic process now to be in my center way more often. And I'm not there. The journey never ends, but I'm far more grounded and present than I have ever been in the past.
What you are saying is completely epic, and I can't wait for everybody to hear it.
Hey guys, studies are showing that 68% of people that watch podcasts regularly don't click the subscribe button. Do me a huge favor. If you like this content, click subscribe so other people know where to go for the cool stuff. Thank you.
I have my primary meditation teacher who I think I started with him over 15 years ago. He found enlightenment in prison. And it was through, he got very into meditation. It's like all the mystics and all the greats have said, meditate, meditate, meditate. And for you to just have the courage and the stamina and the willingness to do that, especially men, do you find that men uh, are more resistant to feeling their emotions because they're told through so much of it, especially in the military? I mean, you have a special forces background. Aren't you guys told to kind of stuff it and just grin and bear it and, you know, feel the pain and move through it? I'm
Yeah,
guessing
and
that wasn't the answer for you.
I remember during basic training, we went because that's when you really get, I want to call it brainwashed. You get hammered to really, you just obey commands. That's what you do. You turn into a bit of a robot. And during basic training, we were sort of getting to the end of it, and we were let off for a couple of days we went and played paintball, shooting other, and this paintball instructor was a civilian, and he was giving us instructions, and we were just dead silent. Yes, sir. No, sir. And he said, I remember him saying, he's like, you guys are allowed to smile and have fun, and we had just become so robotic. But that's very, very necessary for soldiers. Like, if you're going to war, you need that. So, yeah, absolutely. Do men struggle with it more? Yes, I would say masculinity struggles with it more. So men and women, if you've got more masculine woman. And I think this is the part of growing and evolving, is going, well, what's working? Why is it working? What's not working? And through all of my my call it research, um, the question at the back of my mind has always been, how can I live the best life possible? And so I wanted to read other people's stories, and a lot of people that seemed to be more fulfilled had a more spiritual undertone. And so I wanted to research that. And Dr. David Hawkins, do you know David Hawkins? Yeah.
Love David Hawkins. I've read all of his books, and
Yeah.
Letting Go is like one of my favorites. Actually, one of the biggest regrets in my life, I had a friend that would go to Sedona regularly to listen to him talk, and she invited me. And I always thought, I can do it next week, next month, and I never did it. And then, no, he's no longer with us. And but he's epic.
Yeah, he is, and he was an inspiration for me. The Letting Go book is just in the other side of the studio now, but Transcending the Levels of Consciousness was one of the first books I read of his, and it was about sitting with your emotions, and I didn't understand the mechanics of how emotion, and most people don't, right? Do our emotions really control our entire life? And it's like, yeah, they do. So I started practicing it, but I didn't know the mechanics. But then I would learn other things from philosophy and psychology, and the pathway really was through it. And even being a soldier and being a man, I went, well, if I want to reach a state within myself which is more pure, more whole, call it, then this is the process. And one thing led to another. I studied neurolinguistic programming, hypnotherapy, those things. But at the end of the day, I'm certain that nothing is more enlightening than moving through emotion. And so that's the pathway I walked, and I'm so grateful I did. And because when you're going through it, you don't know. It's not like you know what the other side feels like. So you just have to trust. And I had to trust people like David Hawken that there would be light at the other side of the tunnel. So for 3 years, I was heavily depressed and suicidal and just lost and confused, but one foot in front of the other. And Dr. John Demartini as well. Um, gave me some insights when it came to how our perceptions create our emotions. So that gave me a bit more of I want to say, an intellectual understanding. And I would say that my book is a combination of the emotional understanding and the intellectual understanding brought together. How our perceptions create our emotions create our actions. Emotion is energy for motion, and that dictates the outcome in our lives. So, if we really want a more meaningful and fulfilling life, it's about our perceptions, our thoughts, because through a chain of cause and effect, that's the path. So, yeah, I sat down, a lot of meditation and a lot of contemplation. And meditation was the feeling aspect, and contemplation was the understanding why aspect. And when I brought the meditation and contemplation together, that's when that's when I really started to dissolve the aspects of myself that was still looking for validation, wanting to be wealthy for the sake of being wealthy, not as a byproduct of contributing or serving people. But my main points were validation. I just wanted to be special. I wanted to be important, and through this process, was able to dissolve those parts.
Can you expand a little bit more on that? Because we hear a lot about meditation. A lot of people do a lot of meditation and they don't get the thing that they're looking for. But you combine it with contemplation. And David Hawkins was big on that. He said he wasn't a big meditator, but he was a big contemplator. That's so. So you use both. Can you just say you're talking to somebody who's deeply depressed and has been for a long time. They don't see a lot of light. They don't see a lot of hope. How would you just in a nutshell, kind of help them navigate those two concepts?
Yeah. Before I answer, would you like me to talk about meditation and contemplation, or would you like me to talk about that specific scenario? Um,
Whatever you think would be most valuable to the people listening.
okay, I'll give a little talk on meditation and contemplation, then I'll make them relevant to that scenario.
Beautiful.
So, when we think of meditation, maybe we think of someone sitting cross legged, and that's great. There are so many different types. When I was researching meditation, there's just so many different types. And I would say meditation at the core of it is getting to know yourself, become familiar with who you are. I would say that is the underpinning intention with meditation. And when you ask the question, well, who am I? And you trace it back, you're an awareness, you're a consciousness that sits beyond your mind and your thinking. So really, you'll never get in touch with yourself. I say never, that's a strong word. It's very hard to get in touch with yourself while your mind is busy. So, meditation is about really silencing the mind, because when the mind is quiet, then the soul speaks. Then you're like, oh, here I am. This is me. And so, through meditation, it's of course difficult, so difficult, especially our mind is busy because we're emotional. So, we're thinking thoughts based on the emotions we're feeling. And so, it's about sitting with that for long enough for the mind to go quiet. And for me to have that 4-hour meditation that really was life changing, leading up to that point was years of trying, Joe Dispenza's meditations, different meditations, trying to figure out this whole thing. But the best thing was just setting a really clear intention just to sit with myself. And most people, if I run an event sometimes, or a free training, I'll say, just close your eyes. I'll put a timer on, see how you go. And like, when people close their eyes and disconnect from the outside world, what's going inside, it's frightening for people. Their minds don't stop. They wander, they think. So meditation is taming that mind, becoming familiar with your thoughts and emotions, realizing they're not you, coming deeper and going, oh, this is who I am beyond my thoughts and emotions. So that's meditation. I'll put that in that camp. Contemplation is to essentially ponder certain ideas, perspectives. That's pondering perspectives. And so we see the world through our own lens, our own perspective, but that's not a true perspective. It's not truthful. It's our perspective. And so through contemplation, we can look at a scenario in our life, maybe we're depressed, through different lenses. So we're contemplating different points of view to be able to see what is happening within our life, if that's what we're contemplating, or world events. We might contemplate world events. And we teleport ourselves into different positions. And I do it through questioning, and I'll talk a bit more about this. But by doing so, instead of having a subjective perspective, which is not truthful, it's a lie, and that lie, that illusion, is going to lead to emotion within our body, like depression. Depression's an illusion. So we look at all different perspectives and we go, ah, what I was thinking, the way I was seeing the world was not a true perspective. Now I have an objective, true perspective. That's when our higher mind comes online. That's when we're no longer emotional. And that's when we can truly act with free will. So meditation is sitting and becoming familiar with who we are. Contemplation is looking at the perceptions which are actually taking us away from truth, taking us away from who we are, and then dissolving them. Dissolving them. And the way I do it is through questioning. So let's talk about depression specifically. Now, some people may not agree with this, and that's okay. Um, Depression is simply a perception. That's it. We're looking at the world or ourselves in a certain way, and we're feeling depressed about it. It's an emotion. The same way happiness is an emotion, depression is an emotion. I would almost say happy, elated and depressed are opposites. Happy and sad are opposites. And so when I was depressed, like, I knew it was just thoughts in my head, but I didn't know which thoughts were causing it. So I contemplated. I'll use me as an example. I was really depressed, and I didn't know why I was depressed. And I started to contemplate, why am I depressed? What's causing it? And what it was I was perceiving myself to be unworthy because my financial situation was going backwards. That was it. I had an attachment to money because money validated me. So depression is the perception that you don't have what you want. It is that simple. There is something in your life that you perceive should be there, and it isn't. And so I would contemplate and look at different perspectives and go, are there people that have wealth that are fulfilled? And I was like, yes. Okay. I was like, so they must be looking at life differently to me. What's their perspective of things? And I would be like, oh, wealth doesn't validate them. Oh, I get it. Okay. So I went through that process of contemplation to look at what's causing it? Okay, I've got a perception of something not being in my life that I feel should be there. Okay, what is that thing that I feel should be there? For some people, it might be a relationship or love or um, respect. They don't feel respected or they don't feel valuable. And so, beneath their awareness are these beliefs they have about themselves and the world as perspectives. And by asking intelligent questions, and one of the great questions that you can ask yourself if you're depressed is, how is not having this thing I want actually really beneficial to my life? And if you sit and contemplate that for long enough, it's like, okay, how is not having money beneficial to my life? And I started to realize it's like, oh, well, maybe if I was single during this time, it's like maybe if I date woman, if if money was important, that date would be a very different date. I would be a very different person. And I was like, maybe my relationships would be more wholesome if I didn't have an attachment to money and I didn't lead with, oh, I have money, I have wealth. And so I started to look at all the benefits of, I don't want to say being poor, but not being wealthy. And I looked at that and I contemplated it and I found all of these beautiful benefits of like, oh, I'm still a great guy without money. In fact, I could be a much better version of myself. And that slowly, it's very scary because your mind goes, your emotions are just attached to it. But over time, I kept meditating and I kept contemplating until I realized that with or without money, John is John and he's magnificent as he is. And like that dissolved that depression within me. And so it was that process of contemplating, finding the perceptions, looking at different perspectives that gradually over time dissolved that depression and gave me this sort of, it brought me back to life. The sense of resilience returned and yeah, off I went.
That's brilliant. I love it. There's a guy named Nick Santos. Do you know who he is?
I do not.
He's got no arms and no legs, and he
I
competed
do
in
know
MMA.
him.
Yeah, and I heard him asking that same question about, what's the benefit of me having no arms and no legs in dating? And at first you'd think, well, there isn't any. And that's the thing. When you start to ask these questions, your brain wants to say, well, there aren't any benefits. And you really have to sit with, well, what are the benefits? And it's, well, the person that loves him is going to love him for him. And
Hmm.
he's married and has a great life and is, as his sister calls him, the most able-bodied person that he knows, that she knows. So what would you say is, I love what you're saying, by the way, it's pure, pure gold. What would you say is the role of emotions with us? Because we tend to think that our emotions are real, and yet our emotions can be so incredibly misleading. In fact, they can just keep us in misery. There's a wonderful quote: the mind can create a heaven out of hell or a hell out of heaven. Uh, Tell us about the role of emotions. How are they useful? How are they not useful?
So I will say that anything I say, take it with a grain of salt and go and look for yourself. But in my in my opinion, emotions are a primitive way of meeting our needs. All emotions. So that's even what some people would call positive emotions, which I don't believe in. They're primitive ways of meeting our needs. And I can give you some examples. So if we get angry, for example, anger is it's not too different to depression. It's what I call the masculine version of depression. Is there's something in my life that I don't have that I want, right? And so a more masculine person is going to get angry about that and that gives them energy to do something about it. A more feminine, and I'm not talking about male and female. In fact, I'll use a different word. Superiority complex and inferiority complex. So
Mm.
someone with a superiority complex, if they don't have what they want, they're going to get angry. That anger then becomes fuel for them to go and get what they want, but it's primitive, it's not optimal. Someone who is has an inferiority complex, if they don't have what they want, they're going to become depressed. And that is another strategy. It's a victim strategy for getting what they want because the superior person will be like, I'll do it myself, I'll get it myself. The inferior person will become more of a victim and have other people come in and help them meet their needs that way. So emotions are just primitive ways of meeting our needs. And I've got I've created what's called the map of emotion. And this is the centerpiece of my whole book because I believe when you understand what's happening inside of you with your emotions, then you have at least a map to start working your way towards being more authentic. So, emotions are primitive fuel for getting what we want, but they're not optimal. What's optimal is to be inspired. To be inspired and to be emotional are almost at they're almost at a they're like the antithesis of each other. If you're emotional, you can't be inspired. You're going to be motivated by
They're like
pain and
mutually
pleasure.
exclusive.
Yes, right. Beautiful word. So emotion is if you experience negative emotion, you're going to seek positive emotion. And that is your lower mind, your animalistic self operating in a way to attain pleasure or positivity. The same way it's like sex, right? Sex is not your purpose in life. It is just you're looking for pleasure. And so our emotions are sort of the next level up from physical pleasure is emotional pleasure. That's the next one up. Spiritual pleasure is the ultimate one, which is where meaning and purpose comes in. But there are 8 emotions in the map of emotion, and each of those 8 emotions are come in pairs, come in pairs. So there's a positive and a negative emotion that come as a pair. So when we are judging ourselves in some way, either positively or negatively, we're going to experience, if we judge ourselves negatively, we're going to experience shame. If we judge ourselves positively, we're going to experience pride. They're the first 2 emotions in the map of emotion. And that's when we're judging ourselves. And then the next 2 are the emotions of fear and excitement. This is what someone would call their values. So you avoid the things you're fearful of and you seek the things you're excited to attain. And so they come as polarized pairs. And then there is depression, which is when we don't have what we want in life, and elation, which is when we do get what we want in life. They come as a polarized pair. And then there is anger or enraged and relieved. And they come as a polarized pair. Again, when you're in the superiority complex, you're going to experience anger. When you're in the inferiority complex, it'll be depression. Um, so with those 8 primary emotions, which is what I call the map of emotion, that gives you a blueprint of everything. I can, if I know where you're operating in the map of emotion, I can tell you how your relationships are going to be. I can tell you your financial position. I can tell you your where you're going to be successful or unsuccessful in business. I can because every single pattern of behavior comes out of an emotional response. So the map of emotion gives us a blueprint of someone's financial position, their happiness, their health, their wealth, their business success, all of it. And it's all based off of our perceptions of ourselves in the world. So if we think we're better than we are, we experience pride. If we think we're worse than we are, we experience shame. If we see ourselves as we truly are, we're going to be authentic. Okay. Now, with fear and excitement, if we perceive something in the future is going to be worse than it truly is, we're going to experience fear. If we perceive something in the future is going to be better than it really is, we're going to experience excitement. And that is motivation. So as soon as we have a belief that something is going to be worse than it is or better than it is, again, inspiration is gone. We cannot be inspired. We're going to be motivated to avoid the painful thing or attain the pleasurable thing that we're excited about. And some people question excitement. They're like, isn't it a positive emotion? I'll say, it stops you being inspired. So what do you want? Do you want to be excited or inspired? So
I'm loving this. I love this map that you've created. It's very digestible. It seems very practical.
that's what I wanted. I wanted a practical tool that was truthful that people can use. So yeah, people, please use this, and I'll happily elaborate on how to use it as well. So we've already talked about let let's call it anger. In my map of emotion, I would call it rage, but because I go to the extreme emotions. If we're enraged, we don't have what we want. If we're relieved, the pain is essentially ended and we've experienced relief. So those are perceptions of what I don't have in my life and what I do have in my life. Same with depression and elation, what I don't have in my life and what I do have in my life. So those are the eight emotions, and they're all driven by our perceptions. And as soon as we perceive I don't have something in my life, or I do have something in my life, we're going to try and protect what we do have, and we're going to try and attain what we don't have, and that is all motivation. And that leads us in cycles of unfulfilling cycles. We experience transient happiness, we have highs and lows, but we're not grounded, we're not present, we're not being authentic, we're not graceful.
I love this.
And
You're distinguishing between being authentic and inspired and being motivated by these polarities is just I love it. I'm taking notes here and I'm drinking this up.
so and again, I did it for me. I was like, how can I live more inspired? How can I get to the center of my soul? And I realized it was these perceptions I had that were creating emotion in my body, that were driving me into action, that were just creating cycles and patterns in my life. And it wasn't until I went, okay, like my relationships, for example, I was chasing short term flings, you could say. And I sat down, I looked, I was like, what's driving this? And it was, if I went into a short term relationship, it would validate me. I would feel like I would feel worthy. And so I was chasing pride, which meant deep within me was shame. Okay. So all polarized emotions, you will only chase what is the other one is inside you. So if you're chasing happiness, it means sadness is within you, right? If you're chasing excitement, it means fear is within you. And so I went and these short-term relationships, I was like, okay, they're validating me. So I'm chasing pride out of these relationships. And so I went, okay, well, why do I need that? And I looked and there was shame there. So I went, oh, I don't feel good enough. So I have to do this. And as soon as I sat with that shame and looked at the beliefs I had about myself, and where I felt like a failure, where I didn't feel good enough and I needed to compensate and go on these flings, I sat with that. I dissolved it by contemplating, asking the right questions. And within a few months, wasn't planning on it, I met a girl. She's now my wife. So this is manifesting as well. This is where people will talk about this is how manifestation happens. It's not about going after what you want. That will just it's like that's the law of karma. If you chase something, it will evade you. If you try and avoid something, it will chase you. When you neutralize the charge, so you're no longer chasing a positive thing or avoiding a negative thing, that thing you wanted becomes present within your life now because you're a vibrational match to it. And so I just sat down and I do this every morning now. I'll sit and I'll contemplate to clear any um like lower minded, impure, emotional, short term gratifying desires I might have. I'll clean all that out. And then I'll go through an affirmation process of aligning myself with who I am and what my mission and inspired purpose is. And so the map of emotion is absolutely a practical tool that I use every day to bring myself into that centered point,
And what would you say your mission in life is?
to teach it to other people. And there's a reason for that as well, because I asked the question, what's the purpose? Why are we all here? What's this all for? And I don't think anyone has the answer, but I can share my reasoning why. I really believe the purpose of life is to be authentic. I think that's the purpose, is to be ourselves. This physical world is just a classroom for spiritual development. We're here to evolve as beings. That doesn't mean we're here to make a ton of money or we're here to have this is going to be contradictory, not contradictory, conflicting maybe. We're not here to live our dreams because quite often our dreams are quite materialistic. We're here to find ourselves. I believe we're here to find ourselves, and I believe there's evidence for that as well.
Well, there's so many
Hap-
people that go chasing their dreams, and as Tony Robbins likes to say, when you get all the material stuff and you're still miserable, then you're really screwed.
right? Yeah, I mean, I experienced that as well. I made a lot of money when I was before the depression kicked in. I was making pretty good money, and I was still miserable. And yeah, Tony Robbins will say that the secret to living is giving, and I believe that is absolutely part of it. I say there are three things, and I talk about the 9 stages of psychological development in my book, and the last 3 stages are really where I say someone is authentic, which is you're following your aspirations is number 1, and an aspiration is different to a dream. It's different to ambition. So ambition for me sits at is sort of stage 5. Aspiration is stage 7, and aspiration is who who do I want to be? And it's not about what I do or what I have. It's about my character as a being. So that's the first sign. Someone has decided that it's more important to be the best they can be as opposed to what they achieve. they achievements aside is like, am I a good person when I wake up in the morning next to my wife? Am I a loving person no matter what's going on in life? And that I think is one of the biggest challenges that all of us face is, can we maintain that authentic state regardless of what's happening? So that's stage um 7. Stage 8 is contribution, which is serving from that authentic state, because a lot of people serve, but there's an ulterior motive, right? It's, if I want to help people, I want to make an impact, but really you just want to be well known and famous, or I want to be philanthropic and give. Really, it's, there's a motive of maybe you want to be recognized for that, or some people will contribute, but it comes from an energy of I don't feel enough,
Mm.
and hopefully if I give to you, that's going to make me feel better about myself.
Or if
So
I feel
I'm
so much
talking about,
shame, if I give enough, then I'll lift the burden of shame or blame or whatever we're carrying around.
right, right. And so not true contribution. True contribution is when you know who you are, you're clear on um your intrinsic values, which are different to fear and excitement. It's about enthusiasm. When you're clear on your intrinsic values, and your that that process of being yourself is naturally enlightening and inspiring and supportive of others. So it's, you don't have to try and contribute. It is just an expression of who you are. I would say that's stage 8. And stage 9 is I call it emanation. And I don't think we can ever get there, but I believe that's the highest purpose of life, is to head towards emanation, which is, I don't even think you can put it into words. Some people will call it enlightenment, but again, I don't think enlightenment is possible to achieve. It's just moving towards greater and greater degrees of authenticity, of truth, of unconditional love. And so I believe that the purpose of life is to love unconditionally. And that's what inspires me. That's what drives my mission and my purpose is, one, it's I'm here to learn how to love unconditionally. And if I can help people out of, if they're struggling in their relationship or they're depressed or even financially, that is a gateway for me to get into their pain point and help them step closer to emanating their soul, emanating unconditional love. So I see my coaching of others, it's part of a way bigger picture. And although they might be just struggling with something really, um, I want to say small, to them it will be massive, but small, that is an opportunity for them to get closer to their soul, closer to divinity, closer to who they are and the purpose of their life. So that's really my mission.
So you're writing a book. I know you have an Instagram. You do speeches to lots of people on huge platforms, and then you do one-to-one work. What work are you most focused on right now? Is it getting your book out, or how do you see yourself being the most impactful to the most people?
The book for sure, because I was charging a lot of money in the past and it was inaccessible. And I went, this is so dumb. I can't actually help people if I charge this much. And thought, how can I help more people um, in an accessible way? And it was like, write a book, just write a book. So that combined with my whole existential crisis came together beautifully and was like, now here's my gift. So it's get this book into as many hands as possible. I have like an email newsletter, which is where people start, and I feed people the stuff through there. That's the inception point, you could call it. And when the book comes out, I know that's going to be really transformative. And then they can just digest that slowly and then come through my courses and programs. But definitely the book is the inception point.
Beautiful. I love it. I love another thing on your Instagram is healing is only the beginning of the journey. After that comes creating. I love that.
You know, during my healing, I thought healing was the purpose of life. And I realized out the other side, like, well, what was the point in healing? There must be something else. And it's creating. It is creating, climbing that ladder, creating what inspires you. Like that's the beauty of each individual person, right? Is each individual person has something unique inside themselves. And that is their genius, where the key to their mastery lies. And that It's like, how beautiful is that when someone creates something, it's just pure creation and it changes the world. So yeah, heal, please, but just know that you're here for something greater than just to heal. You're here for something which only that unique aspect of yourself can create. And I think that is such a, such a inspiring thought or way to live, that healing is just the start, you know?
Can you comment on the life experience that somebody has being stuck in the polarity, the chasing, the avoiding, the inauthentic versus the being in the authentic and having those aha moments where you've you've transcended, for want of a better word, maybe you have a better word, but you've transcended those old polarities uh, and melded into connecting to your true authenticity. What is the experience of life like for somebody in the first category versus the second category?
I think most people have probably experienced it in a really minor degree. When you have an aha moment and you see something from a different perspective and you feel lighter. If you look at it in degrees of heaviness and lightness, you could say, it's
Isn't that why they
continue
call
that.
it enlightenment?
That is exactly why they call it enlightenment. So you're going from, density and heaviness to rarity and lightness. And as each step goes, what I've found, and I'm by no means at the end of my journey, is the mind becomes more clear because it's less full. I would say life also, presence is the word. You just become more present and engaged with what you're doing. And instead of doing something as a means to an end, you do it as an end within itself. So you're present as you do the dishes, as opposed to doing the dishes because you need to clean them to get onto something else. And so life becomes just more graceful. And in my book, I talk about the golden virtues. And I sort of mentioned them earlier, five golden virtues. They're the because in the qualitative world of the soul, there's no quantity, there's no measurement. It's not like, oh, I lost 5 kilos of weight, so now I'm happy. That's quantitative. Oh, I made this much money, so hey, look at me. So as soon as you step into that qualitative world, there's no marker for where you sit or where you stand. There's no reference point. And so I say that there are five virtues that we experience. The first one is presence. There's just much more presence in your life. And you've probably wrote these down, I think. So presence is the first one. Authenticity is the second one, which is you're being truthful. You're not, holding yourself back. So presence, authenticity, groundedness. So you're much more grounded instead of being dragged around by your emotions, having highs and lows. You're grounded, you're centered. The next one is you're enthusiastic. So it's no longer fear and excitement driving you. You're just enthused. Fear and excitement operate in time. You're avoiding that. You're seeking that. When you avoid that, you feel better. When you get that, but enthusiasm is just never ending. It's a mission. So you're enthused. And the last one is graceful. You're graceful. So there's no, your actions sort of flow. The second guessing of yourself starts to diminish more and more and more until you're just who you are, truthfully and gracefully. And to add to that, grace then occurs within your life. So, like I said, with meeting my wife, things just happen and they happen organically without force, just synchronistically. Synchronicities start happening more often. And life is, I want to say, more harmonious, which some people could interpret as peaceful if you want peaceful. Yeah, you're not controlled by your emotions as much. You just get to be you. Your free will kicks in and you get to create.
Beautiful. So you said there were 9 levels of authenticity. What are 1, 2, 3, and 4? We covered 5 and up, I think, but I'm really curious as what the whole scale is. And maybe you don't
Yeah,
have it memorized.
no, I do. I absolutely do. So the first level is sustentation, which is that's the will to survive. So each
Mm,
level is marked by your will. What is your will driving you to do? So, stage one is sustentation, the will to survive physically. Stage two is what I call congregation, and that is the will to survive emotionally. And I can dive into more detail with these as well afterwards. Stage three is domination, which is the will to have power and control. Stage four is obligation, which is the will to order and stability. Stage five is ambition, which is the will to personal freedom. Stage six is compulsion, which is the will to peace and harmony on earth. And then we go through stage seven is aspirations, stage eight is contribution, and stage nine is emanation.
Beautiful. I love that. Did you create that? I mean, did you is that are you is that one of your teachers or is that your gleaning?
That's my gleaning. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, so
Yeah, I say that all the time.
I yeah,
We're
I
so lucky.
researched. Oh, absolutely. And this is what I mean by when people follow what inspires them and they create a unique piece of work for the world, it's like all of us get to benefit from that. Um, yeah, I love it.
So
So,
I know John Demartini was one of your people that you studied with. Can you mention a few others? David Hawkins. You said a few things, and it made me think. I had recently read the Courage to Be Disliked and the Courage to Be Happy. I don't know if that was any inspiration to yours along the way.
so yeah, John Demartini has been fantastic, but my first sort of mentor was Tony Robbins. That was where I started. I listened to his audio collections that pushed me towards NLP. And obviously each mentor has their limitations and you move around, but Eckhart Tolle has had an influence. David Hawkins, a really big influence. Abraham Maslow is not a mentor, but I've read a lot of Maslow's stuff. And if people have, do you know, have you heard of Ken Wilber?
No. You
No.
know what? The
So,
name's familiar, but I couldn't quote you a book or anything.
yeah, integral theory is his theory, and he has similar stages of awareness. He mentored Tony Robbins on the spiritual side of things. So I took from all of these people and I tried to find confluence. And there's a book called Spiral Dynamics, which is written by Don Beck and Benjamin Cohen. And because David Hawkins had his map of consciousness, and then Abraham Maslow has his hierarchy of needs. But even his hierarchy of needs, if you've read his actual work, it's not really a triangular hierarchy. And he talks about meta motivations and he calls them B values, being values, but it wasn't in a system or a model. So I was reading that. Lawrence Kohlberg was another one. And I just took all of this information and contemplated a lot of contemplation. And I would sit, I've got stacks of paper just beside me, and I would just draw pictures going, well, that doesn't match that. So one of these two people is either not really accurate or they're saying something and I don't understand it. So I would try and understand Maslow's perspective and then I would try and understand Ken Wilber's perspective. And I looked at them all and I built this framework and it ties in with the map of emotion as well. So as you read my book, because this is all in my book, the map of emotion is really the centerpiece of a person's personality, and their personality then sits as a certain stage of development. So the first two stages, I also read the Bhagavad Gita, which
Mhm.
is like the Hindu text, an interpretation of it, and I wanted to layer that on going, well, does this text align with what I'm teaching? And that aligns there. And then obviously the Bible and the seven sins, it's all in there. It's all interlinked and interwoven in the book. So these nine stages of psychological development, and you could call them spiritual development, are the stages we go through from being more animalistic, the will to physically to survive, to more angelic, which is that the top emanation is the will to harmony. And harmony isn't peace. It is a balance of yin and yang, which is peace and war, you could say. And when you have those two forces in balance, then you have harmony. So at the highest level, emanation is the will to harmony.
I love
Yeah.
it. Is this gonna be available on audio too? I'm a huge audiobook person.
I don't think so. And
Ah.
this is maybe we have different learning styles. I'm very visual, and the book
Uh,
has got diagrams all through it,
mm.
the map of emotion, the different perceptions we can have that lead to the emotions, our patterns of behavior. It's all visual. But I was thinking if I audiobook it, I would then just have a link so people could go online and reference the
Oh, you can
diagrams
have
that
a
I've got in the
PDF.
book.
They have PDFs with audiobooks,
Right. So that's an option. Yeah.
and I hope you record it yourself because I always love it when the authors record it.
Right. I'm taking notes.
Because there's so much information that comes through your voice. I mean, you've done so much work, and when you're speaking, you're speaking from somebody who's actually done this and wants to share that pathway with others. So, if you were to go back and talk to 6-year-old John for a few minutes, what would you say to him?
Oh, I'd probably cry. um, I honestly think I would just observe him and just love him. And I probably wouldn't say anything and I would let his life unfold the way it has. And yeah, I would just love him.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Because the path that you walked was the path that you needed in order to get these realizations and be able to contribute like you're contributing. Is that correct?
100%. And I'll say this to anyone, we all have we've been dealt different hands in life. I actually wrote this I was at the gym yesterday. I wrote this in my notes. And this is how I know physical success doesn't matter because it doesn't matter what someone's position is in life. Every single person has an equal opportunity to evolve spiritually. So whether you are in the slums of India or you're, the Sultan of Brunei, equal opportunity to evolve spiritually. Dead equal. So the Sultan's challenges are going to be different to the person living in the slums challenges, but both, if you look at their emotional patterns, both of them are going to be equally as pleasurable or painful, which is a catalyst for spiritual evolution. And so, yeah, my pathway was absolutely the pathway I needed to discover out who John discover who John is. The same way any person, no matter where they're situated, is equally as has equally as much opportunity to discover themselves. And so that's I think, and I could be wrong, but I think that's the purpose of life is to take your situation and use it to figure out who the hell you are.
Ah, I just love this. John D. Martini has a great quote, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. Everything that you are not grateful for is your baggage. Everything that you are grateful for is your fuel.
I actually haven't heard him say that, which surprises me.
Really? Wow. That should be in your
Hmm.
book.
I have a chapter on unconditional love and gratitude and talk about the way gratitude is what opens up free will. A lot of people think they're choosing freely, but it's their emotions. And until someone is grateful, they are controlled really by their past. And gratitude is that's the synthesis point when you synthesize one of these polarized emotions, you experience gratitude. And then, yeah, that's where enthusiasm comes through. And that's where true free will reigns. When you appreciate life, I could even say that the purpose of life is to learn to appreciate life because when you appreciate life, then you're free to create.
This is just epic what you're saying. Gratitude opens up free will. Everything that you said is just, uh, I can see people listening to this a few times to get all the goodies out of it. So, if you were talking to the whole world for a minute, what would you like everybody to hear?
Uh, I would say that inside each and every person is the power to change the world. And that is, you might not see it yet, but if you spend the time getting to know yourself and how powerful you truly are as a creator, then you hold that the power to move mountains and create changes in the world. And I believe that if you follow that path of figuring out who you are and doing that, not only will you bring benefit to the world, but you'll also be fulfilled and inspired along the way. The duration of your life won't matter. What happens outside of you won't matter because you'll be on an inspired mission. So start by figuring out who you are and what inspires you, and then follow that. And I want to say at any cost, if you become poor or broke in the process, follow that. If you become rich and famous in the process, follow that. As long as you're bringing yourself to the party in each and every moment, then you're going to make an impact and live in fulfilling life.
I love that. In the Diamond Sutra, it says that all if you took all the acts of giving and charity and bundled them together, it wouldn't be as important as getting to that enlightenment within yourself. Would you agree with that?
Yes, yes, 100%. I've never heard that. Is the Diamond Sutra from? Where's that from? Is that from like the Upanishads or something?
I read that from Byron Katie's husband, Stephen
Okay.
Mitchell. He's uh, an expert in that area, and so I've read his works, and that was one of the books that they put out had that information in it, which I thought was pretty cool. Because I like
I
to say
think
that
that's
healing is an inside job. Because another one of your quotes that you have on your Instagram is that the master focuses on what they can control, the masses worry about what they can't control, and that's such a huge. That's a big learning there.
mm, and I think people don't realize maybe what I mean by that is the only thing you can control are your thoughts. That's it. That is it. Because it's your thought. Even what you do comes from your thoughts. So the master just really, really focuses on what's going on between their ears.
John, this has absolutely been epic being with you. Your future. I just can't wait to see how the book rollout comes. It's coming out in what month is expected?
Look, I'm going to say October, but with most of these things, it takes longer than you sort of
It's
set
like building a
yourself.
house,
So,
right?
yeah, yeah. So, end of October at this stage, but let's just say the last quarter of 2025.
And the book is Authenticity: Become the Person You Were Born to Be and Live the Life You Were Born to Live.
No.
Oh, you changed
So yeah,
it.
you're reading that off my Facebook, aren't you? Are
I
you?
got old stuff there.
It is authenticity, the art and science of being your true self.
Love it. Okay, I can see why that evolved. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So how can people find you? How do they get on your newsletter? We'll put it on the show notes, but for those listening that they just want to follow you and get started, what do they do?
Yeah. My handle on Facebook and Instagram is at John Templeton. Yeah, at John Templeton Official, and my website is johntempleton.io. Okay, johntempleton.io, and you can sign up for the newsletter there. Follow me online, and yeah, I just share freely. So if that helps you during your day,
And do you
fantastic.
have some
That's my.
courses that people can order and follow? And
I did have. They're being cleaned out. I'm going to say no. Join the newsletter. Wait for the book. That's where we'll start. I'm going to run. I think I'm going to run an event for the book release called 5 Days of Wisdom. I think at this stage, or Empowerment Through Wisdom, which is where I'll be completely free for about 8 to 10 hours total, taking people through the main chapters of the book and how to use the tools that are within the book. So look out for that event that I'll be putting on in between now and the end of the year.
fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here. Folks, leave us a comment. Please like and subscribe and share this with other people who need to hear these words of wisdom. Thank you so much for being here today, John.
Thank you so much for having me.
This podcast is intended for the purpose of providing information and education. It does not provide advice and is not meant to be used for any self-diagnosis or the replacement of any kind of licensed professional. The creators and individuals appearing here do not endorse any specific tests, positions, medications, products, or procedures. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.